Imagine a crisp Bohemian dawn, the air carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth. The first rays of sunlight, hesitant yet persistent, begin to paint the edges of the eastern mountains. It is in this quiet, unassuming light that we find the seeds of a story often overlooked. A tale of individuals whose perceived limitations became the very foundation of extraordinary strength. We are not speaking of grand armies or royal decrees, but of a specific, dedicated group within medieval Bohemia, men who, by necessity or by design, cultivated senses and skills far beyond the ordinary, ultimately finding remarkable success not despite their blindness, but in many ways, because of it. To truly understand the profound impact and unique contributions of these knights, we must first examine the intricate social, political, and military landscape of Bohemia during the High Middle Ages, a period of both internal consolidation and external pressure, a time when innovation was not just a luxury, but a vital necessity for survival and prosperity. The story of the Blind Knights is woven into this rich tapestry, an unexpected thread that adds depth and fascination to the broader historical narrative. The Bohemian lands, nestled in the heart of Central Europe, had a long and complex history by the time the phenomenon of these specialized knights began to emerge. Its roots can be traced back to the early Slavic settlers, the formation of the Great Moravian Empire, and then the establishment of the Przemyslid dynasty, a ruling family that would shape Bohemian identity for centuries. By the 11th and 12th centuries, Bohemia was a duchy, then a kingdom, increasingly integrated into the Holy Roman Empire, though often with a fierce sense of its own distinct culture and traditions. This period saw the gradual feudalization of society, the rise of a knightly class, and the construction of imposing castles that dotted the landscape, silent sentinels of power and defense. The economy, while largely agrarian, was also experiencing growth, fueled by silver mining in regions like Kutna-Hora, which brought wealth and attracted merchants and artisans, fostering a more dynamic urban life alongside the rural domain. The military structure of medieval Bohemia, like that of most European polities, was built upon the foundation of feudal levies and the elite force of knights. Knights were the shock troops, the heavily armored warriors mounted on powerful steeds, trained from a young age in horsemanship, swordsmanship, archery, and the use of lances. Their armor evolved from mail to the more formidable plate armor, providing significant protection. Their training was rigorous, often beginning in childhood as pages and squires in the households of noble lords, where they learned not only martial skills, but also courtly manners and the principles of warfare. However, this traditional model, while effective, relied heavily on sight for target acquisition, battlefield awareness, and communication. It was within this established order that the unique contributions of a specialized group of knights began to manifest, offering a fascinating counterpoint to the conventional understanding of medieval combat. The emergence of what we might term blind knights, or more accurately, knights who developed extraordinary compensatory skills due to blindness or severe visual impairment, is not a documented phenomenon in the same way as the establishment of a formal order or a recognized military unit with a specific charter. Instead, it appears to have been a more organic, albeit remarkable development, a testament to human adaptability and the rigorous training regimes that could be applied even in the face of such a profound sensory challenge. The precise origins of this specialization are difficult to pinpoint with exact dates, as historical records often focus on more prominent figures or larger-scale events. However, by examining the societal attitudes towards disability, the nature of knightly training, and the specific challenges and opportunities presented by Bohemian warfare, we can begin to piece together a plausible narrative. In medieval society, individuals with disabilities faced a wide spectrum of treatment. While some were marginalized, others, particularly those from noble families, might still find avenues for participation and contribution, especially if they possessed other valuable attributes or if societal needs created unique roles. For a young man born into a knightly family, the prospect of blindness, whether from birth, illness, or injury, would have been devastating, potentially extinguishing all hopes of a martial career. Yet, the resilience of the human spirit, coupled with the resourcefulness of medieval society, could, in certain circumstances, redirect these ambitions. It is conceivable that families, unwilling to abandon a son from the warrior class, might invest in alternative training, focusing on cultivating his other senses and developing specialized combat techniques that minimize the reliance on sight. The training of a knight was not solely about brute force. It was also about discipline, coordination, and an understanding of the battlefield. This inherent structure of knightly education provided a framework that could be adapted. For a knight with diminished sight, or no sight at all, the emphasis would shift. Auditory cues would become paramount. The sounds of approaching cavalry, the clang of steel, the shouts of men, the whinny of horses, these would need to be processed with an almost preternatural acuity. Tactile senses would also be amplified. The feel of the reins, the balance of his weapon, the very vibrations through the ground from the movement of troops and horses would provide vital information. Proprioception, the sense of one's own body position and movement, would be honed to an exceptional degree. The development of specialized equipment and tactics would have been a natural progression. Consider the horse, the knight's most crucial partner. A visually impaired knight would need a horse that was exceptionally well trained, perhaps one that had a pre-existing bond and understanding with its rider, capable of responding to subtle shifts in weight and pressure, and even to vocal commands delivered with a particular cadence or tone. The saddle might have been modified, offering more secure support, and the reins might have been designed for a different kind of grip, allowing for more nuanced control. Weaponry might also have seen adaptation. While the traditional lance, requiring precise aiming, might have presented challenges, other weapons could have been favored. The sword, wielded in close combat, relied more on feel and reaction. A warhammer or mace, with its powerful impact, might have been particularly effective. The use of specialized gauntlets, perhaps designed to provide better grip or to convey tactile feedback from the horse, could also have been part of this evolving arsenal. But perhaps the most significant aspect of their success lay in their tactical approach. If these knights were to fight effectively in formations, their coordination would need to be extraordinary. This suggests a level of trust and communication within their unit that transcended verbal commands, perhaps relying on prearranged signals, rhythmic movements, or an intuitive understanding developed through years of shared training and combat experience. Imagine a unit of knights moving in unison, not by the visual cues of the knight in front, but by the subtle sounds of their collective movement, the shared rhythm of their horses' gaits, and an almost telepathic bond that allowed them to anticipate each other's actions. The military context of Bohemia during the era of the Crusades and the subsequent Mongol invasions provides a backdrop where such specialized skills could have been both necessitated and refined. The fragmented nature of warfare, the skirmishes along borders, and the need for adaptable units could have provided opportunities for these knights to prove their worth. The Mongol invasions of the 13th century, for instance, were characterized by swift cavalry movements, sophisticated tactics, and a relentless assault. While Bohemia was not directly conquered, it was certainly impacted by the wider geopolitical shifts. In such a volatile environment, any unit that could contribute effectively, regardless of its composition or the perceived limitations of its members, would have been valued. Furthermore, the concept of the order in medieval society was not limited to religious institutions. Military orders, like the Knights Templar and Hospitaller, while not directly relevant here, demonstrate a model of specialized, highly trained warriors bound by a common purpose and code. It is conceivable that a similar, though perhaps less formal structure could have developed for these knights. A localized noble family, recognizing the potential of visually impaired individuals within their retinues, might have invested in their training, fostering a distinct unit that could be deployed in specific roles where their unique skills offered an advantage. The battlefield, especially in close combat, is a chaotic environment. Amidst the din and confusion, sheer aggression and unwavering resolve are often as critical as precise aim. A knight who cannot be distracted by visual stimuli, whose focus is solely on the immediate threat and the feel of his opponent, might possess a terrifying advantage. Their training would likely have emphasized discipline, and emotional control, crucial for maintaining effectiveness in the midst of battle. Fear, while a natural human emotion, would need to be managed and channeled, and perhaps for these knights, their very reliance on other senses fostered a different kind of focus, a more internalized awareness that was less susceptible to the outward chaos. Consider the role of music and rhythm in military formations throughout history. Drums and horns were used to signal movements, maintain morale, and intimidate the enemy. It is not a great leap to imagine that a unit of these knights might have developed their own internal rhythmic cues, perhaps even through the sounds of their armor, their horses' hooves, or specifically designed signaling devices that produced consistent sounds or vibrations. This would allow for coordinated maneuvers without direct visual oversight. The training regimen would have been extensive. Beyond the physical conditioning, it would have involved extensive work with their mounts, developing an almost symbiotic relationship. This would require a deep understanding of equine behavior and a mastery of subtle control. Hours upon hours spent in the saddle, learning to interpret every shift in the horse's stance, every flick of its ears, every subtle tension in its muscles. The goal would be for the horse to become an extension of the knight's will, a partner that could navigate the battlefield with unerring accuracy, guided by the rider's finely tuned sensory input. The development of their auditory perception would have been a lifelong pursuit. This would involve not just listening to the immediate sounds of combat, but learning to discern the direction, distance, and nature of every sound. The subtle difference between the hoofbeats of a single horse and a charging squadron, the metallic ring of a dropped weapon versus the parry of a sword, the direction of a shouted command, these would all become critical data points processed with immense speed and accuracy. This training would likely have been integrated into their daily lives, not just restricted to practice grounds. Imagine them practicing maneuvers in dense forests or during storms, pushing the limits of their sensory capabilities under challenging conditions. Tactile sensitivity would also be honed to an extraordinary degree. The feel of the reins, the grip on their weapon, the texture of their armor, the vibrations transmitted through the saddle and the ground, all of these would provide a rich tapestry of information. They might have trained with specialized gloves, designed to enhance tactile feedback, or perhaps even with modified armor that allowed for a more direct sensation of impact. The psychological aspect of their training is equally fascinating. In a world where visual prowess was often equated with martial skill, the deliberate cultivation of alternative sensory strengths would have required immense mental fortitude and an unwavering belief in their own capabilities. Their training would have fostered a profound sense of self-reliance and an internal compass, guiding them through situations that would disorient others. The ability to remain calm under pressure, to focus intently on the task at hand, and to trust their own finely tuned senses would have been paramount. This psychological resilience, honed through years of dedicated practice, would have been as vital as any physical skill. Imagine them being deployed in dense fog during nighttime operations, or within the claustrophobic confines of a castle courtyard during an assault. Their ability to perceive and react without relying on visual cues could have provided a decisive advantage in such scenarios. The development of specific combat techniques for close-quarters fighting would have been crucial. In the melee, where visibility is often severely limited even for sighted individuals, a knight who relies on touch and sound would be on a more even playing field, and potentially superior if their training had been sufficiently specialized. The ability to parry blows by feeling the trajectory and force of the weapon, to strike with precision based on the perceived position of the opponent, and to maintain situational awareness through auditory cues would be key. This suggests a very different approach to swordplay, focusing on subtle movements, anticipation, and an intimate understanding of the opponent's body mechanics. The concept of a blind knight might also extend to individuals who sustained injuries that led to blindness during their careers. In such cases, their prior experience as a sighted knight would have provided a foundational understanding of warfare, which they could then adapt and build upon. Their ingrained knowledge of formations, tactics, and the psychology of combat would be combined with newly developed sensory skills. This would be a testament to their dedication and the willingness of their commanders to invest in their continued service. The question of how such a specialization would be maintained across generations is also intriguing. If it were a family tradition, passed down from father to son, it would require a consistent environment and a strong incentive. If it were an institutionalized training program within a noble house or a specific military contingent, it would demand dedicated resources and a clear understanding of its strategic value. The continued success of such a unit would, of course, be the most potent argument for its perpetuation. Each successful deployment, each instance of overcoming a perceived disadvantage, would reinforce the value of their unique approach. The historical evidence for this phenomenon is, as mentioned, not abundant in the form of explicit chronicles detailing the blind knights. However, absence of direct mention does not equate to absence of occurrence. The nature of medieval record-keeping often favored the grand narratives of kings and battles, overlooking the specialized roles of smaller, perhaps less politically prominent, groups. The story of these knights likely exists in the margins, in the hints and implications found within broader historical accounts of warfare and society. We must look for the subtle threads, the anomalies that suggest a deeper, more complex reality. One might consider the possibility that certain Bohemian noble families, renowned for their military prowess, might have had individuals who, due to unfortunate circumstances, lost their sight. Instead of retiring them from service entirely, these families, deeply invested in their martial lineage, might have sought to find a new role for them within their retinue. This would not necessarily be a public declaration of a blind order, but rather a pragmatic adaptation within the existing feudal structure. These knights, while perhaps not leading charges, could have served in crucial support roles, acting as advisors, trainers, or even specialized combatants in specific situations where their unique skills shone. The development of specialized training manuals, even if they did not survive to the present day, is also a plausible scenario. These would have outlined the specific exercises, drills, and tactical principles necessary for visually impaired knights. Such manuals would have been jealously guarded secrets, passed down within families or within the elite units that employed these knights. The very act of creating such documentation points to a deliberate and organized approach to cultivating these skills. The role of faith and chivalry in medieval society also offers a lens through which to view this phenomenon. While chivalry often emphasized valor and prowess, it also had a charitable and protective dimension. It is not entirely outside the realm of possibility that a sense of duty or piety might have driven some to dedicate themselves to finding meaningful roles for individuals with disabilities within the martial sphere. This could have been seen as an act of service, both to God and to the realm, by transforming a perceived weakness into a source of strength. The strategic advantages would have been manifold. In an era where cavalry dominated the battlefield, the ability to control a horse with exceptional precision, even without sight, would be invaluable. Imagine a knight who could position himself perfectly in a charge, not by visual aiming, but by the feel of the horse's momentum and the subtle cues from its body. This would translate to more effective impacts and a reduced risk of friendly fire. Furthermore, in the chaotic environment of a siege, where smoke, dust, and close-quarters combat were common, the advantage of not being reliant on sight would be amplified. These knights could have excelled in clearing ramparts, defending narrow passages, or participating in desperate last stands where visual distraction could be fatal. Their heightened sense of hearing and touch would allow them to perceive threats that sighted individuals might miss. The concept of the untold story often lies in the subtle adaptations and innovations that lie beneath the surface of grand historical events. The blind knights of medieval Bohemia, whether as a formal order or as a more informal but highly specialized group, represent precisely this kind of story. Their existence, though not always explicitly documented, can be inferred from the adaptive nature of medieval warfare, the resilience of the human spirit, and the deep-seated traditions of martial training. The meticulous detail required for their training would have been staggering. It would have involved a constant feedback loop, with trainers observing not just the physical execution, but also the subtle adjustments and reactions of the knight and their mount. The emphasis would be on repetition, refinement, and the development of ingrained reflexes. Imagine hours spent in simulated combat scenarios, where the knight would have to react to an array of auditory and tactile stimuli, developing an almost instinctual response to danger and opportunity. The development of specific vocalizations or rhythmic patterns for communication would also be a fascinating area of study. These would have to be distinctive enough to be recognized amidst the din of battle, but subtle enough not to reveal their presence to the enemy. Perhaps a series of clicks, whistles, or short, sharp calls, each with a specific meaning, would have been employed. The training would involve associating these sounds with specific actions and formations, ensuring that the entire unit could move and react as one. The choice of battlefield terrain could also have been a strategic consideration. Open plains might have been less ideal for visually impaired knights, while more complex environments, such as wooded areas, hilly terrain, or even urban settings during sieges, might have played to their strengths. The ability to navigate by sound and touch through uneven ground or dense foliage would have been a significant advantage. The lasting legacy of such a group, even if their numbers were small, would be in the innovations they spurred. The very existence of a unit that could achieve battlefield success despite visual impairment would have challenged conventional thinking and potentially led to broader adaptations in military training and equipment for all soldiers, not just those with disabilities. It speaks to a broader principle of maximizing human potential through focused training and adaptive strategies, the mental fortitude required to not only survive but to thrive in such a demanding environment is almost unfathomable. It speaks to a profound level of self-discipline, trust in one's own abilities, and a dedication to the art of warfare that transcends physical limitations. These knights would have been living embodiments of courage and resilience, transforming what might have been seen as a tragic fate into a unique and potent martial skill. Consider the social implications as well. If these knights were able to achieve success and recognition, it would have contributed to a more nuanced understanding of disability within medieval society. It would have demonstrated that physical limitations did not necessarily equate to a lack of capability or a lack of contribution to society. This could have had a ripple effect, encouraging greater inclusion and opportunity for individuals with disabilities in other spheres of life as well. The story of the blind knights of medieval Bohemia, therefore, is not merely an account of military tactics. It is a testament to the indomitable human spirit, the power of specialized training, and the often overlooked ingenuity that arises when individuals are challenged to adapt and overcome. It is a story that, while perhaps not shouted from the ramparts, resonates deeply within the annals of history, reminding us that true strength often lies not in the absence of challenges, but in the ability to transform them into opportunities for greatness. The detailed and methodical nature of their training, the intricate sensory development, and the strategic implications of their unique skills paint a picture of a remarkable chapter in Bohemian history, one that deserves to be explored with the same calm deliberation that characterized their own extraordinary lives and careers on the battlefield. The very nature of their survival and success demanded a profound internal focus, a detailed processing of the world through senses other than sight, a skill set honed over years of relentless, yet purposeful dedication. This methodical approach to mastering their craft is in itself a calming narrative, a testament to the power of focused effort in the face of adversity. The quiet determination that would have permeated their training grounds, the steady rhythm of their practice, the measured feedback from their instructors, all contribute to a picture of history that is both deeply fascinating and inherently soothing in its detailed exposition of human endeavor. The echoes of their presence linger in the very stones of Bohemian castles and the rolling plains where their ancestors once rode. They represent a fascinating divergence from the conventional narratives of medieval warfare, offering a glimpse into a world where perceived limitations were not endpoints, but rather the starting points for extraordinary adaptation and achievement. The intricate tapestry of their training, their tactics, and their battlefield triumphs, when unraveled with patience and meticulous detail, reveals a story that is not only historically significant, but also profoundly calming in its exploration of human resilience and the quiet, persistent pursuit of excellence. The sheer volume of practice, the repetition of drills, the constant refinement of technique, all contribute to a sense of deep historical immersion, where the slow unfolding of events and the detailed exposition of methods can indeed lull the listener into a state of relaxed contemplation. This is history at its most absorbing, a testament to the fact that even in the most unlikely of circumstances, human ingenuity and determination can forge paths to remarkable success, leaving behind a legacy that, though sometimes understated, is no less compelling for its quiet strength. The historical record, when meticulously examined, reveals patterns and practices that, while perhaps not sensational, offer a deep and satisfying understanding of the past. The story of these knights, with its emphasis on sensory development and specialized training, is a prime example of this. It is a narrative that unfolds with a deliberate, unhurried pace, allowing for a thorough appreciation of the details that made their achievements possible. This methodical exploration of a unique aspect of military history provides a sense of order and structure, which can be incredibly conducive to a restful state of mind. The absence of dramatic crescendos or sudden turns of events, replaced by the steady, detailed recounting of their evolution and application, creates a gentle narrative flow, perfect for winding down and allowing the mind to drift through the fascinating landscape of the past. The focus remains firmly on the facts, the techniques, and the gradual development of skills, ensuring a deeply engaging yet serenely paced journey through this untold story.